Hey, First Baptist Church, Pastor George here. I'm going to show you how to make our communion bread. This is the communion bread that Amy and I make for us that we use on our communion Sundays. And it's pretty easy. I posted the recipe already there on Facebook for you. And so now I just want to kind of give you a video of kind of how to make it. It's not real hard, but it is a little different from making normal bread. So the first thing I like to do when I start making the communion bread is start the oven, which gets preheated to 350 degrees. For us, that's just turning it on, because it automatically starts at 350, so I don't have to change anything. So while that warms up, we'll mix our ingredients together. The first thing that we want to put together are the hot ingredients, which is the water, the milk, and the butter. And we want to heat that in the microwave until hot, or I think the culinary term is scalding. We don't want it boiling, we want it hot. And sometimes that's hard to tell. So what I just kind of do is I just kind of go until the butter's melted all the way. So with our recipe, which you can there find on Facebook, we need 1/4 cup water. So we'll take our measuring cup here and find 1/4. It's down there. We'll get our 1/4 cup water here, which is really hard to see on this thing. I think I'm a little past. Yeah, a little past. Pour a little bit out there. Sure we're right. Looks like we're right. Right with 1/4 cup. And then the next thing, we need 3/4 cup milk. So we'll get 1 whole cup all together. So we take our milk and we pour in until we get to 1 cup here. There we go. And then it says 1/4 cup butter, which is, if you look at the guide on the butter stick, it just ends up being 1/2 stick of butter. And I prefer to use salted butter. My wife probably prefers to use unsalted butter. Either one is fine. They both work. And you put salt into the dry mix anyway, so it doesn't really matter. So now we pop this into the microwave. And I think I start off at 1:30, and we'll see what happens there. While that's kind of cooking, you can kind of then start on the dry ingredients in your bowl, which is 1/8 cup sugar. So we take our 1/8 cup here, and we get our sugar. Now I know some of you might tell me that you're supposed to put the flour in first or the sugar in first. I'm not a baker, so if I'm doing this wrong, you may criticize, that's fine, but I think it turns out okay most weeks. So we got that. Now we need 1/2 teaspoon of salt. So I have my teaspoon here. I need to get my salt. So here's my salt. And we'll get our 1/2 teaspoon of salt going. So that looks about right. There we go. And now we need our 1 1/4 cup of flour. So we got our 1 cup here. Stick that into the bag and flatten it out. There's 1. And here comes the 1/4 cup. Flatten that out. 1/4 cup. Then I like to take a nice whisk and just kind of whisk that all together there. Mixing it up as best I can. Salt, sugar, and flour. So let's check our microwave here if our butter is... No, butter's not quite melted all the way, and it's just kind of warm right now. So we'll try for another minute here. And while that goes, we'll just kind of continue mixing our dry ingredients as that goes. So that salt and sugar and flour gets mixed up nice and well. And don't worry, I washed my hands beforehand. I know that's probably not shown in the video, but just want to make sure that you know that I washed my hands beforehand. But this is not bread that you're going to get, because we're going to do this at each person's home. So think that's probably good. Now we're just going to kind of wait here for our microwave to get our hot stuff. Once the hot stuff's ready, you can just pour in the hot stuff with the mix that's in the bowl, and you're going to want to mix that up first, then add the other dry ingredients that come next, which is just simply another 1.5 cup flour. And this dough's a little weird when you do it, so. Oh yes, this is nice and melted, this is nice and hot, it's not boiling, so that's all good. So we pour that in. When we do that, what I like to use is a spoon, and I kind of coat it with some non-stick because this dough is really sticky. So let me grab my non-stick. I have a nice plastic spoon here that I like to use. Just over the garbage here, spray that. And now we just start mixing up that flour, sugar, and salt with our wet ingredients. And once this all gets, we're going to get kind of a, I don't know how to describe this type of dough. It's not a smooth dough. It's very lumpy, and it has a very hard time wanting to stick to itself, especially when we add the other 1.5 cup of flour. And at that point, you usually want to use your hands. So this dough looks like it's pretty good. Doesn't look like we have much powder flying around in the bottom there. So should be kind of a thick, tough type, wet type dough. So that's what we're going for. And look at that, nothing stuck in my spoon. That's awesome. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take 1.5 cup of flour. So that is just simply 2/4 cups, like so. And then our 1 cup here. Need to get some more. Now, what makes this bread tasty to eat is the sugar. So you want to make sure that you don't forget the sugar. And just for fun here, we'll mix what we can with our spoon. And as you can see, the flour just does not really want to stick to the dough very well. So you have to just kind of keep working it until it eventually all just kind of gets worked in, and you get this nice big lump. But that big lump's going to be kind of flaky, is the best way I can kind of describe it. So at this point, when I get to about here, this is where I kind of have to roll up the sleeves and start actually working that flour into the dough. It's going to be warm, so you want to be careful there. But as you can see, once you kind of squeeze that dough together and get that flour worked in, it eventually starts to adhere. But like I said, this dough is just kind of flaky. I have all this excess that we still kind of need to try to work in if we can, so I try to scoop it up. To be honest with you, I've never watched my wife make this, so I don't know if she does the same thing or not, but she might have a completely different process than me, but this is how I do it. So I try to work that in as best I can. So you can see that I'm kind of making a mess there, but I am not one to like messes while baking. I clean usually while I go. So try to continue working this stuff in the best we can. And this makes a lot of bread. I mean, we feed our whole congregation, and there's a lot left over, which my kids love. They love eating this bread after communion. So then what we can do here is we can kind of take some of the leftover flour. We like to use a baking stone. We like to use the baking stone and get some flour on there to kind of spread out so it doesn't stick to it. But you can use a 9 by 13 dish pan, but if you do that, or a glass pan, if you do that, you want to make sure that you grease it real well. So then what we do is we take our dough, and basically we just need to flatten it out. You don't want a thick dough because it doesn't rise, so it doesn't really necessarily cook in the middle. It just gets warm and kind of gets tougher, as it were, I guess is the best way I can describe it. So we just want to work this out to the edge so that we have a fairly even layer that's not super thick going across the whole thing. And you might get some cracks in it like that. It's really okay. But I try to flatten it out so that it's thin, small pieces. Now, kind of what you do with pizza crust, you kind of aerate it. So what you do after you get it out onto your tray, you just want to take a fork, and then you're just going to kind of systematically go through and stab it so that the hot air can get in there. And you might pull up some of the dough, and that's okay. You just want to try to get enough of this in there so that it cooks evenly, bakes evenly, whatever you call it, I don't know. So, oops. Yeah, see, that's the flakiness I'm talking about. It just gets really flaky, and that's okay. But every time I make this bread, I think about how I need to go on Amazon or something online and get one of those pizza aerator rollers that you see them use. And I always forget to go get one of those. And so I'm always left with stabbing the thing everywhere. So once we got our holes, that's good with that. It's okay that it looks like that. That's perfectly good. We throw it in the oven. We put ours on the middle rack. Set it for 30 minutes. And that's it. And you can take it out. We use a pizza roller to cut it into all those little squares, but since you're going to be enjoying this at home, feel free just to kind of rip yourself a piece and take a bite when we partake. But other than that, that's our communion bread. We hope that you enjoy it, and hope that you might have some fun maybe with kids or grandkids making this for this Sunday. So have a great night, and we'll see you Sunday.